Imagine this. You're a young medical resident. A woman gets wheeled into the ER, and literally minutes later, she's dying on the table. Someone's yelling at you to take over CPR. So you start doing compressions, pounding on her chest, your first time doing it on a real person. But nothing works. She dies. Right there in front of you. Everyone just scatters. And you're left standing there completely horrified, thinking, what in the world just happened? That exact moment, well, it haunted Dr. Peter Attia for years. See, the immediate cause of death, maybe it was a pulmonary embolism, that wasn't the whole story. The real question, the one that just gnawed at him, was what was really wrong with her? What was the long, slow process that had been unfolding for years, maybe decades, that led her to that one tragic final moment? So let's dive into it. In this explainer, we're going to break down Dr. Attia's book, Outlive, which is basically his journey to answer that very question, not just for that one patient, but, for all of us. And what he finds leads to a complete rethinking of how we should approach health and aging. That story from the ER, it's not just some sad anecdote. For Attia, it represents something much bigger. It's a massive systemic failure in our entire approach to modern medicine. Think about it. Modern medicine, or what Attia calls Medicine 2.0, is honestly a miracle. It can snatch you right from the jaws of death after a bad car crash or a massive heart attack. But here's the huge paradox. It's terrible, absolutely terrible, at preventing the slow-burn diseases that cause those heart attacks in the first place. It's like it waits for the entire house to be engulfed in flames before it even thinks about calling the fire department. So this problem leads to the central idea of the book. We need a radical shift in our whole philosophy. We need to move toward what Attia calls Medicine 3.0. Okay, first things first. We have to redefine the goal. It's not just about lifespan. The total number of years you're alive. It's about health span, the number of quality years you live, with energy and vitality, free from disease. Medicine 2.0 is pretty good at tacking on a few extra years of life at the very end. Attia calls it the marginal decade. But those years are often spent in decline. The whole point of Medicine 3.0 is to make our last decade look a lot more like our best. And look at the contrast here. It's night and day. Medicine 2.0 is reactive. It waits for you to get sick, for symptoms to show up, and then it scrambles to put out the fire. Medicine 3.0, on the other hand, is proactive. It looks at your health today and asks, okay, based on this, where are you going to be in 10, 20, or even 30 years? And then it intervenes now to change that path. It's a total shift from just treating sickness to actively building and cultivating wellness. So if we're going to be proactive, what exactly are we fighting against? Well, Attia identifies 4 major groups of chronic diseases that should be the main targets of this new approach, and he gives them a pretty epic name: the 4 horsemen. Just these 4 categories of disease, they account for the overwhelming majority of deaths in people over 50 who don't smoke. It all comes down to these 4. So who are these dreaded 4 horsemen? First, you've got atherosclerotic diseases. That's your heart attacks and strokes. Second is cancer in its many forms. Third, the neurodegenerative diseases that can steal your mind, like Alzheimer's. And finally, number 4, the one that's often leading the whole charge, metabolic dysfunction, like type 2 diabetes. And here's the brilliant strategic insight of Medicine 3.0. We don't have to fight 4 totally separate wars. Turns out, these horsemen, they're all deeply connected. In fact, Attia argues that having poor metabolic health is a key driver, a foundational problem for all of them. So by fixing that one root cause, our metabolic health, we can actually lower our risk for all 4 at the same time. So how does our metabolism get so out of whack? Attia uses this fantastic bathtub analogy. Think of your safe fat stores, the fat right under your skin, as a bathtub. Now, when you consistently eat more energy than your body uses, that tub starts to fill up. No big deal at first, but eventually it's going to reach the brim. But what happens if you keep the faucet of excess calories running? Well, the fat has to go somewhere. It spills over into places it has no business being, like your liver and your muscle tissue. And that spin-over, that's what causes all of the metabolic chaos, like fatty liver disease and insulin resistance. All right, so we know the enemy, we know the root cause. How do we actually fight back? This is where the strategy gets really practical. Attia lays out 4 key pillars, the tactical things we need to master to build a long and vibrant health span. The first pillar is exercise. But this isn't about running a marathon or getting six-pack abs. Nope. Attia reframes it completely. The goal is to train now for what he calls the centenarian decathlon, a list of physical tasks you want to still be able to do when you're in your 90s. Can you pick up your grandchild? Can you lift your own suitcase into the overhead bin? Can you get yourself off the floor without help? Exercise is, bar none, the single most powerful tool we have for extending our health span. Pillar number 2 is nutrition. And man, after decades of diet wars, keto versus vegan, low-fat versus low-carb, it's so easy to feel like it's all just useless noise, right? Attia's argument is that we need to escape the diet wars entirely. Instead, we should focus on what he calls nutritional biochemistry. This just means forgetting all the labels and asking a simple question. How do different combinations of proteins, fats, and carbs affect my individual body? It's a super personalized approach, driven by your own data from things like a continuous glucose monitor, to figure out what eating pattern helps you reach your goals in a way you can actually stick with for the long haul. The third pillar is sleep. For so long, many of us, and Attia includes himself here, we treated sleep like it was a waste of time. But a friend once asked him this really profound question. If sleep is so useless, why would evolution let us spend a third of our lives completely unconscious and vulnerable to predators? And the answer, of course, is that sleep is absolutely non-negotiable. It's critical for our memory, our metabolic health, and our emotional regulation. It's a superpower. And this brings us to the fourth and final pillar, the one we so often forget about: emotional health. This whole pillar was driven home for Attia by his therapist, who one day just stopped him and asked this question. He was dedicating his entire career to helping people live longer. But what's the point of all that extra time if you're miserable? And this gets right to the heart of it. Emotional health is not some soft, secondary issue. It is physical health. Full stop. Things like chronic stress, unresolved trauma, and deep emotional pain, they have direct physical consequences that can damage our bodies just as badly as any of the 4 horsemen. And all of this brings us to the most powerful and, honestly, the most optimistic message of the entire book. It's the idea that we actually have control. We have agency over our own health journey. This right here is the ultimate takeaway. Your family history, your genetics, the bad habits you used to have, they are not your destiny. They're just information. They're your starting point. You have the power to change your trajectory. By embracing this Medicine 3.0 mindset and really focusing on these pillars, your longevity is way more within your control than you probably believe. So we're going to end this explainer where Attia begins with all of his patients, by turning the question back to you. This question, it forces us to stop just passively letting the future happen and to start actively building it. It's not about fearing death, it's about having a real strategy for life. So, what is your plan?